They sat me near the water jug. Not the main table. Not even close. A fold-out chair beside the cups and napkins. I could still hear them laugh. Hear forks clink against ceramic. But I wasn't part of it. Just close enough to see. Too far to be seen. The cake had white roses on top. Store-bought. Too sweet. No cinnamon. No soul. Someone handed me a plate then walked away. No one made space beside me. No one asked if I needed help with my coat. I folded my napkin slowly. The same way I used to fold pie crust, neat, quiet, careful. My hands still smelled like clove and flour. They always do. A little girl took a picture. Everyone smiled. I smiled. Later, I saw the photo. I wasn't in it. They had cropped the frame. Cut out the corner. Cut out me. Said it made the picture cleaner. I've been many things in my life, a mother, a host, a maker of meals. But never clutter. Not until now. I kept holding the dish towel in my lap. The old one. Frayed edges. Smells like home. No one noticed. The youngest asked Grandma, "You okay over here?" I nodded. She left before I could answer. I sat there watching candles flicker on the birthday cake. 78. No one sang. Not out loud. That's when I knew I hadn't been forgotten. I'd been moved. From the center to the edge. From voice to background noise. They didn't mean to. But meaning doesn't soften the ache. So I sat in my folding chair next to the punch bowl. And whispered to the napkin in my hands. If they won't bring me back to the center, I'll build a new one myself. One that smells like cinnamon. One that listens. One that remembers. You ever notice? The quietest ones are the ones who used to lead the loudest rooms. There was a time when my kitchen was never quiet. Sundays used to start with music. Old vinyls spinning slow. Sam Cooke, Nina. Patsy. I'd crack the windows just enough to let the wind tease the curtains. Let the smell of cinnamon drift out and pull the family in. They didn't need to be called. The scent called louder than any bell. I'd hum while slicing apples, my fingers moving without looking. That's how often I made the pie. Everyone had their job. Tyrone set the table. Lacey polished the forks. Even little Rachel would carry napkins like she was delivering treasure. It wasn't fancy. Just heavy plates, warm hands, and that long pine table with the dent from where I once dropped the flour canister. I never fixed it. Some imperfections are worth keeping. By noon the table would be full. 3 generations passing dishes and stories. Someone always laughed too loud. Someone always spilled something. And no one ever left hungry. Back then, I was the center. Not because I demanded it, but because love drew the circle around me. Now the kitchen stays clean. Too clean. Too quiet. They say it's better that way. Easier. No mess, no noise, no fuss. Rachel told me once, "Grandma, we do things different now. We order. It's just simpler." Simpler, yes. But not warmer. They bring salads in plastic bowls with names I can't pronounce and forget the tablecloth altogether. One Thanksgiving, they brought paper plates with gold trim. "Look how pretty," Linda said. "But they bend," I whispered. She didn't hear. Or didn't care. I still keep the old cloth napkins. Folded. Starched. Waiting. Sometimes I iron them just to feel useful. The pie tin sits untouched on the top shelf. I don't need to see it. I know where it is. I know it remembers me. They tell me to rest. To enjoy. To let them take over. So I sit while they order, arrange, direct. And I smile like I'm not remembering how to make a whole meal from scratch with 2 hands and a busted oven. There was a time they asked for my recipes. Now they ask me to stay out of the kitchen. It started small. The first shift was the chairs. I used to sit at the head of the table. Not because I asked to. Because they placed me there. Because that's where stories begin. One Christmas, I walked in and found my seat gone. Moved. To the far end. Closer to the window, they said. It's quieter there. Quieter. Yes. Colder too. I smiled. Didn't ask why. Didn't want the answer. The next time I noticed the centerpiece had changed. No more mason jars. No cinnamon sticks tied with string. Just glass beads and white lilies. Linda said it was more modern. I nodded. But something hollowed out inside me. They started saying things like, "We've got it handled, Mom. You don't need to worry, just relax and enjoy." Funny how relax starts to sound like step aside. And enjoy starts to taste like be quiet. I watched as Linda stirred canned gravy in the microwave-safe dish. She said no need to complicate things with scratch recipes. Scratch. That word meant something to me. It meant knowing every spice by smell, not label. It meant adjusting by instinct, not measurement. But she didn't ask me how I used to do it. She didn't ask at all. I offered to bring my apple pie. The one I made every year. She paused, then said, "We're going light on desserts this time." Light. En dessert. I laughed. Quiet. Into my apron. That apron still smells like cloves. Still holds flour in the seams. I haven't washed it completely. Some things should linger. They called it progress. But it felt like erasure. A slow, vanishing not of my body but my presence. I told myself it was just the times changing. But the truth is, they changed the room before asking if I still wanted to be in it. The old wooden table is still in the garage. They wanted to throw it out. Said it was too scratched. Too bulky. Too dated. Linda asked me, "Is there any sentimental value here?" I said nothing. Just looked at the spot where Tyrone carved his name at age 10. They replaced it with a glass top one. Wobbly. Shiny. Soulless. Said it matched the new dining chairs. Those chairs don't creak. Don't remember laughter. Don't hold the shape of people who leaned in to whisper secrets after second helpings. I still keep the old salt and pepper shakers. Little ceramic apples. Chipped, yes. But they sit heavy in the palm. Like something real. They call my taste old-fashioned. Once Linda said, "You know, not everything needs to be passed down." I smiled. But my hands clenched under the table. She talks about legacy like it's a thing you can select from a registry. But mine lives in burned pie edges. In gravy stirred counterclockwise. In the dent on the oven handle from when I dropped the roasting pan in '91. They don't ask about those things. Don't want to know. To them I'm the soft voice behind a closed door. A presence in the holiday photos if I fit the aesthetic. One Easter, I wore a red cardigan. Rachel said it clashed with the palette. Linda handed me a beige shawl. Here this is more neutral. I look like a guest at my own table. Even the family slideshow played without a single photo of me from the last 5 years. They said the files got mixed up. But the silence told the truth. I used to be the keeper of memory. Now I'm the corner they crop. But memories don't erase that easy. Not when you've poured them into every tile, every recipe, every corner of a kitchen that once knew your name. The first time I wasn't asked to bring a dish I pretended not to notice. I showed up with my apple pie anyway. Still warm. Wrapped in a hand towel with red checks. Linda smiled tight-lipped, like she was holding in something sour. "Oh. We already have desserts," she said. The pie sat untouched at the end of the buffet line. Right between the gluten-free brownies and a bowl of fruit salad sprinkled with chia seeds. Nobody took a slice. Not even Tyrone. He used to beg for second helpings. Used to lean over the counter just to steal a pinch of crust before it cooled. Now he just nodded and walked past. I stood there holding the serving knife like it might turn things around. It didn't. Later that day, I found the pie still sitting in its dish cold and untouched. Someone had covered it with a paper napkin. Not even foil. That's how you cover leftovers you don't plan to keep. I packed it up without a word. Brought it home. Set it on my counter. The kitchen light flickered above me. I didn't cry. But I sat there with my hand resting on the pie lid like I was trying to remember if it had ever truly belonged to them or just to me. The next week, Rachel came over. She opened the fridge and saw the pie tin. "Grandma," she said, "why didn't you serve this?" I just looked at her. She closed the fridge. Didn't ask again. Some things don't need answers. Just silence, thick enough to taste. I used to bake that pie with music playing, knees aching, heart full. Now I keep the recipe folded in the back of my address book. Not for them. For me. Because sometimes you have to preserve things when no one else will. I noticed the spice rack was missing. It used to sit above the stove, 12 little jars, all labeled by hand. The writing faded, but the smell still strong when you twisted one open. Cinnamon. Clove. Nutmeg. Love. That's what they meant to me. I asked Linda where it went. She said, "Oh, we decluttered. Made things more streamlined." Streamlined. She handed me a plastic bin with packets of seasoning. Taco mix. Ranch powder. Labeled. Color-coded. See, easier this way. I held the bin like it might bite me. My jars were gone. I didn't yell. Didn't ask her to bring them back. Just nodded and tucked the bin under my arm. Later I found the old jars in a box in the garage next to the kids' old toys and tangled Christmas lights. The cinnamon jar had a crack in it. Still smelled like December. I unscrewed the lid and stood there for a long time, eyes closed. Memories poured out quieter than words. They weren't just spices. They were chapters. The cinnamon was Christmas Eve. Nutmeg was my husband's favorite French toast. Clove. Clove was Thanksgiving. Always. I took the jars back to my room. Lined them up on the windowsill. Not for cooking. Just to remind me I still held the recipe. That night, I watched Linda post a photo. Holiday prep. It showed her standing in my kitchen holding a tablet with a recipe pulled up. Some modern twist on stuffing with cranberries and quinoa. The caption said, "Making new traditions." I stared at that screen and felt something shift. It wasn't anger. It wasn't sadness. It was a quiet kind of knowing, the moment you realize you've already been replaced. Not by someone cruel, but by convenience. By digital lists. By delivery apps. By people who forgot the smell of things made from memory. A week later, I heard them planning the Christmas dinner. Not in the kitchen. In the living room while I folded laundry 2 rooms away. They spoke softly. But not softly enough. Linda said, "Let's keep it simple again. We'll do catered sides, store pies." Then Rachel asked, "Should we ask Grandma to bring anything?" Silence. A pause that filled the hallway. Then she gets tired, Linda said. Best not to overwhelm her. Overwhelm. That word landed like cold water. I was not overwhelmed. I was overlooked. They forgot that work in the kitchen used to be my joy. My language. My offering. They treated it like a burden instead of a blessing because it didn't fit the picture anymore. Later that night, I went into the kitchen by myself, turned on the small lamp over the sink. Stood there barefoot on cold tile. I pulled out my old recipe book. Leather cover soft at the corners. Each page worn thin from fingers, not time. I read the notes in the margins: add more cinnamon if Tyrone's home. Rachel likes hers extra sweet. They used to make me feel needed. Now they make me feel like I'm lingering. That night I baked a pie. Didn't tell anyone. Didn't share it. I just let the smell fill the house. Let it climb the stairs. Wrap around the lampshades. Seep into the curtains. Old houses know. They remember. The next morning Rachel came downstairs. Something smells familiar, she said. I nodded. Didn't answer. She looked at the pie cooling on the counter. You made it. I just smiled, sliced a piece, set it in front of her. She took a bite. Closed her eyes. Didn't speak. Some things don't need words. Just warmth. And silence. I didn't bake to prove a point. I baked to remember who I was before they decided who I should be. The dining room looked different that Christmas. The table was new. All glass sharp corners, no warmth. My old pine table, the one with scratches, the one with memories, had been taken to the garage. Too bulky, Linda said. This one opens up the space. Opens up. Or empties out. I stood in the doorway and felt like a guest in a house I used to host. Even the chairs were different. Gray. Modern. The kind that made no sound when you shifted. No creaks. No soul. They had centerpieces too. Tall white lilies in glass cylinders. No scent. Just for show. I remembered when we used mason jars and tied cinnamon sticks with twine. They smelled like December. Like effort. Linda caught me looking. Said, don't worry, we're keeping it minimal this year. Less clutter. Clutter. That's what tradition is now. An inconvenience. Tyrone walked by, saw me standing with my hands clasped. Said you, okay, Ma. I nodded. Too tired to teach him what silence meant. Later I offered to help in the kitchen. Linda waved me off. No need. We've got everything prepped. The counters were lined with plastic containers. Labeled. Green beans almondine. Maple yams. Pumpkin ravioli. From that new place, she said. Everything's organic. I looked for the gravy pot. The old one with the dented handle. Gone. In its place, a microwave-safe dish still warm from reheating. They had replaced everything except the clock on the wall. It ticked soft, steady. A quiet witness. At dinner, they handed me a plate already filled. No passing of dishes. No asking what I wanted. I sat at the edge again. Near the window. Closer to the cold. I picked up my fork, but the food tasted flat. No salt. No story. Just calories. No memory. I looked around the table. They laughed. They scrolled their phones. And I realized they weren't trying to exclude me. They had simply built a new table without me in it. After dinner, I wandered into the garage. The light flickered overhead, yellow and tired. There under a sheet was my table. I pulled the fabric back like uncovering a body. Dust danced in the air. The wood was dry, but the grain still strong. My fingers traced the edge. The same edge where Rachel used to sit, legs swinging. There was the burn mark from when I set down the pot too soon. The carved heart with T+R inside. Tyrone and his little rebellion. Memories etched, not just remembered. They had taken it out because it didn't match. Because it didn't fit the style. But style doesn't carry story. I sat on the old bench beside it. It creaked like it missed being used. I closed my eyes. Heard laughter, echo, not the real kind, but the kind memory keeps for you. Tiny feet running. Silverware clinking. My husband's deep hum as he carved the roast. I opened my eyes and felt the silence wrap around me. They had built something new upstairs. Polished. Clean. Empty. Down here was the past. Dusty. Heavy. Real. I stood up and ran my hand across the surface once more. A layer of dust came away. Beneath it still warmth. Still mine. I whispered to the wood, "I'm still here." It didn't answer. But it didn't need to. Later that night, I watched them upload photos. One of the captions read, "Building new traditions. Another love isn't about things, it's about people." But people forget. Things remember. Especially tables. Especially the ones that fed generations without ever asking to be noticed. I clicked away from the screen. Went back to the garage. And laid a clean cloth over the table I loved. Not to hide it. To prepare it. Because something in me knew this table wasn't done yet. Not by a long shot. A few days after Christmas, I found my old recipe card tucked in the junk drawer. It was stained with butter creased at the corners and written in my younger hand. Apple pie, for holidays or heartbreak. I had scribbled that in blue ink decades ago. Funny how true it still felt. I ran my fingers along the words, each loop of the P familiar as my own heartbeat. It used to sit in a little frame on the kitchen counter. Now it lived among batteries, loose change, and keys no one remembered. I pulled it out, brushed it off, and pinned it to the fridge. Didn't ask. Didn't explain. Some things reclaim themselves just by standing tall again. That afternoon, Rachel stopped by. She saw the card, tilted her head. "Is that the one with the flaky crust?" I nodded. She smiled, soft and real. "I always liked yours better." Better. That one word sank into me like honey into warm bread. Later Linda came into the kitchen. Paused at the fridge. "Oh. You found this." She tapped the corner of the card. "Yes," I said. "I didn't want it forgotten." She nodded. Didn't say more. But she didn't take it down either. That was something. Progress maybe. That night, I pulled down the flour tin. The one with the faded lid. Still had just enough to make one pie. I mixed the dough by hand. No measuring cups. Just feel. The way I used to. The kitchen smelled like itself again. Warm. Worn. Alive. I didn't bake for them. Not this time. I baked for the recipe. For the table in the garage. For the woman I used to be before paper napkins and silent dismissals. When I pulled the pie from the oven, the crust split just slightly. Steam curled up like breath returning to a room long held still. I placed it by the window to cool just like always. The house didn't say a word. But I could almost hear it breathe again. My 78th birthday came with no surprises. They called it a quiet lunch. Said it'd be simple. Said they didn't want to overwhelm me. That word again. We met at a restaurant with beige walls and chairs too soft to sit straight in. Linda had made the reservation. Tyrone brought flowers. Rachel brought her camera. They ordered a cake. Vanilla. With buttercream so thick I had to scrape it off with a knife. Nobody asked if I wanted chocolate. Or apple. Just vanilla. The kind that looks pretty in pictures but tastes like nothing at all. The waiter placed me at the end of the table. Again. Next to the water station. Where staff filled pitchers and dropped ice with loud thuds. They said it was more spacious. But I knew it was out of the frame. I smiled. Held my purse tight in my lap. The same way my mother did when she felt small in rooms once built for her. Lunch went on without much pause. Tyrone talked about work. Rachel showed photos from a trip I wasn't invited to. Linda commented on traffic. No one asked me what I'd been doing. What I'd been thinking. I cleared my throat once. No one looked up. I stopped trying after that. When the cake came they lit 2 candles. A 7, an 8. Someone joked. Almost 80. You'll outlive us all. I smiled, but inside, something folded. Rachel lifted her phone. Let's get a photo. She panned the camera, angled it just so. Smile. I did. Later, I saw the post. A perfect photo. Soft light. Warm filters. Plates wiped clean. People leaning close laughing. But not me. I was cut out. My shoulder made it in. Barely. The caption read, "Family is everything." I read it twice. Then I set the phone down and walked to the kitchen. Opened the drawer. Took out the red check towel. Held it. Pressed it to my chest. That towel had more memory than the whole meal. More warmth than the buttercream. I sat at the small table in my own kitchen. Lit a single candle. Poured tea. Cut a slice of leftover pie. No one sang. But the silence was mine this time. Not assigned. Not accidental. Not exclusion. Choice. And that choice tasted better than anything they served me. That night the wind came in off the coast. It rattled the back windows, shook the pine trees outside, and made the house groan softly like it too had something to say. I couldn't sleep. Not because I was sad. I knew sadness. I'd worn it like an old robe before. This was different. This was a kind of quiet fire. I got up, pulled my cardigan tight, and went to the garage. The cold bit my ankles. The floor felt harder than usual. But the table was still there. Still waiting. I turned on the old radio, the one my husband used to fix every year. It crackled for a moment, then settled on a low jazz station. Soft horns. A voice I didn't know but felt like I had. I laid out a cloth. Placed 2 teacups. And the pie. Saturday down at the head of the table. Where I used to sit. And I let the memories come. The laughter. The scolding. The flour in my hair. The way my husband winked at me when the roast came out just right. The way Rachel once clapped when her mini pie didn't fall apart. It wasn't grief that filled the room. It was presence. Mine. For the first time in years, I felt solid again. Not a shadow. Not a relic. Me. I stayed out there for hours. When dawn came, the light crept in through the small window above the workbench. It landed on the table, golden soft reel. That's when the idea came. Not out of anger. Not out of revenge. Just a quiet knowing. There were other women like me. Women who used to cook for 20, and now reheated soup in silence. Women whose hands still remembered how to fold dough, how to braid challah, how to taste without measuring. Maybe they didn't want to be teachers. But maybe, just maybe, they didn't want to disappear either. I stood smoothed, the cloth picked up the empty plates. And whispered to the morning light. They may have moved me to a corner. But corners hold foundations. Corners hold strength. And I was not finished. Not yet. Not even close. The following Sunday, I walked to the church basement. It smelled like old hymnals and lemon polish. The kind of scent that lingers in pew cushions and winter coats. I held a paper flyer in my hand. Printed at the local library. Just 4 words at the top. Baking from scratch. Tuesdays. Below that a simple line. Bring your hands. And a memory. I had taped one on the bulletin board next to prayer requests and soup calendars. Left a small stack by the coat rack. Didn't expect anyone to come. That first Tuesday I brought my mixing bowls, the wooden spoon with the crack down the handle, and my grandmother's measuring cup. No numbers left on the side, just trust. I set them out on the folding table. Laid the red check towel beside them. Poured a thermos of coffee. Waited. At 10:17 the door creaked open. A woman with silver hair and blue gloves stepped in. She looked around like she'd stumbled into memory. I saw the flyer, she said. Wasn't sure if it was real. It's real, I said. Sit. You like cinnamon. She smiled. The kind of smile that had once been a full laugh but hadn't stretched that far in a while. Soon another came. Then one more. Bei 10:45 we were 4. All over 60. All with hands that knew more than our mouths could say. One woman, Jean, said she hadn't baked since her husband passed. Another, Dolores, said her daughter told her to leave the cooking to the younger ones. We didn't talk much that first day. But our hands moved. Measuring, stirring, folding. And when the pies went into the oven, the whole basement filled with the smell of something we hadn't named yet but knew by heart. Cinnamon. Butter. Belonging. We sat around the table, sipped coffee, and waited. No music. No phones. Just stories shared in the quiet between timers. It wasn't a class. It was a remembering. Not for anyone else. Just for us. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like a guest in my own life. The next Tuesday, we became 7. Word had spread quietly through phone trees, bulletin, whispers, and grocery aisle conversations. No flyers. No hashtags. Just memory doing what memory does best. One woman brought her mother's apron, still smelling faintly of bay leaves. Another arrived with trembling hands, apologizing that she wasn't very useful anymore. I placed the rolling pin in her palm and said, "Then it's time we remind your hands." We didn't rush. The dough had its own pace. So did grief. So did healing. Some couldn't remember recipes, but their muscles did. The way they pressed, folded, brushed, egg wash over crust, it all came back without words. Dolores cried when her crust didn't crack. Jean laughed for the first time when her pie overflowed. And I stood at the sink rinsing bowls in warm water, watching these women reclaim parts of themselves no one had asked about in years. By week 3, we had a rhythm. Coffee first. Quiet chatter. Then hands in flour. The church basement smelled like Saturday mornings again. Like grandmothers who used to carry the weight of holidays without ever asking to be thanked. One morning, Rachel stopped by. She peeked through the door, eyes wide. "Grandma, what is this?" I didn't answer right away. I handed her a warm roll. She bit into it. Closed her eyes. "It tastes like you," she whispered. I smiled. That's the point. She looked around at the others. At the soft hum of shared silence. At the way Jean was teaching Dolores how to crimp edges just right. "This is beautiful," she said. "It's not new," I replied. "It's just been waiting." She asked if she could take a photo. I nodded. But only if everyone wanted to be in it. They did. And this time, I stood in the middle. No corner. No crop. Just us surrounded by cinnamon, quiet strength, and the sound of healing rising from an old oven. A week later, we had to push 2 tables together. 12 women. 12 aprons. 12 sets of stories. Some wore lipstick again. Some brought their own music, old hymns, soft jazz, one even brought Patsy Cline on cassette. The oven could barely keep up. But we didn't mind the wait. Waiting was familiar. We had waited all our lives to be seen again. Pastor Linwood came downstairs one morning, drawn by the scent. He smiled, eyes glistening behind thick glasses. "My mother's rolls used to smell just like this," he said. We offered him one. He took 2. Then he asked, "Would you all be willing to bake for the community lunch next month?" The room went quiet. Not out of fear. Out of awe. Someone wanted what we made. Not out of pity. But because it was good. Dolores squeezed my hand. I didn't think I still had anything to give. I looked her in the eye. "You never stopped. They just stopped asking. So we said yes." And every Tuesday after we baked with purpose, batches grew larger. So did the laughter. I brought in extra flour, more rolling pins, printed recipe cards, with blanks, so each woman could write her own name at the top. Not Grandma's pie. Not passed down. But Jean's peach tart. Dolores' cinnamon buns. Names returned to things that mattered. We hung an old corkboard on the wall and tacked up photos. No filters. No cropping. Just hands and dough. Smiles with flour on cheeks. Aprons tied over soft middles and stronger hearts. Rachel brought a friend from her college. A young woman studying community healing. She sat in a corner, taking notes eyes wide. "This is exactly what we study," she whispered. I chuckled. "Darlin', we're not a project. We're just tired of fading." She asked if she could write about us. I said, "If you write, don't make it sound like we were rescued. Just say we came back. Quietly. On purpose." She nodded. Tears in her eyes. I handed her a biscuit. She ate it slow. Then smiled, like something had finally settled where it belonged. It was Rachel who brought the reporter. She called first, asked softly if I'd be open to it. "A small piece," she said. "Local column. Highlighting women over 70 who are shaping the community." I nearly said no. But then I thought of Dolores, who now laughed louder than the oven timer. Of Jean, who started wearing lipstick again after 20 years of chapstick and silence. Of the smell that filled that basement like a second heartbeat. So I said yes. The reporter came on a Thursday. Wore a blazer too stiff for a church basement, but her eyes were kind. She asked questions no one had asked in years. Why baking? What does this space mean to you? What made you start again? I looked down at my hands still dusted in flour. Still capable. Still mine. Then I said, because they moved me to a corner, and I remembered. I still knew how to build a table. She stopped writing. Just looked at me. Then nodded. Sometimes you don't need to add anything. You just let the words sit. Like dough. Like truth. The article came out a week later. A table reclaimed, women over 70 stir up legacy, with love. There was a photo. Not posed. Not airbrushed. Just me holding a pie surrounded by women in aprons laughing. In the middle of the page. In the center. Linda called first. Her voice softer than I remembered. Mom. I read it twice. Pause. I didn't know you were doing all this. I smiled into the phone. You didn't ask. Another pause. Then I'm proud of you. Not sorry. Not defensive. Just that. And it was enough. For now, Tyrone sent a text. No emojis. Just Ma. That's your crust. I'd know it anywhere. Even Rachel shared the article with the caption, "My grandma never needed a spotlight. But look how she shines." And just like that, the woman they moved to the edge had taken root in the center again. Not by noise. Not by anger. But by scent memory, and hands that never forgot how to hold warmth. The next Tuesday, we ran out of chairs. Some brought their own. One woman brought a stool from her garage, painted pale green chipped at the legs. She said it used to be her mother's. Then she sat down like it had waited for her all these years. The reporter had written truthfully. No sugar. No pity. Just us as we were. Capable. Warm. Stubborn in the best way. That morning a teenage girl showed up. Hair in a messy bun. Phone in one hand, canvas bag in the other. I read about this, she said. My Nana used to make molasses cookies. She died before I could learn. I pulled out a recipe card from the growing box by the window. Held it toward her. Let's make some new memory for her, I said. Her hands were shaky at first. But she stayed. She stayed. By noon, the basement buzzed with the scent of cloves and brown sugar. New voices, old methods. Side by side. At the end of class, I looked up and saw Linda standing in the doorway. No camera. No clipboard. Just her. She walked in slowly, eyes scanning the room like she was trying to understand what she'd missed. I wiped my hands and walked over. "Wasn't sure you'd come," I said. She looked down. Then said quietly, "I didn't know what you needed." I nodded. Sometimes the most honest thing is admitting you never asked. She glanced at the pies cooling by the wall. "Are those your crust?" I smiled. "They're ours now." She looked around, saw Dolores teaching a young woman how to braid dough. Heard Jean telling a story about her mother's Sunday bread. Saw what we had built in silence with flour and thyme. Linda reached into her purse, pulled out a folded sheet. A flyer. "Would you like to host a demo at the city food fair next month?" I raised an eyebrow. "Host, huh?" She laughed. "It's optional." But I thought, maybe the city should taste what legacy really means. I didn't answer right away. Just reached for my apron, tied it back on, and said, "Well, then we better start practicing." We spent the next 3 Tuesdays preparing like it was a holiday. Not rushed. Not perfect. But full of purpose. Jean practiced her lemon pie until the crust didn't crumble. Dolores found her mother's handwritten notes and taught us a braided loaf none of us had ever seen before. I brought back my apple pie. The one with the crimped edges and too much cinnamon. Rachel offered to design the signs. She used photos she'd taken in class. Unedited. Soft light. Real smiles. Linda helped print recipe cards. On each one, she wrote in the corner, "From the hands of," and left space for every woman to sign her name. Names matter. Presence matters. 2 days before the fair, the church let us use the main kitchen. Industrial ovens. Big mixers. Wide counters. But we still brought our own spoons. Our own bowls. Our own way. We worked slow. Talked low. But everything was steady. Rachel came in with tote bags she had screen printed herself. On the front, "A taste of legacy." Inside, a slice of pie, a recipe card, and a photo of our group standing around that folding table. She handed one to me. "Grandma, people need to taste this. But more than that, they need to remember." I looked at her. Not as a girl who had once forgotten me, but as a woman who had learned how to see again. I held the bag close. Then nodded. "We've been here all along." The morning of the fair, we wore our aprons with pride. Some tied with knots too big, some with embroidery faded, but all worn like armor stitched with memory. We carried pie tins like offerings. Set up our booth under soft sun. The banner above us read, "From scratch with grace." People started to come. Some curious. Some hungry. Some tearful. We served them quietly. No microphones. No slogans. Just pie and patience and the scent of stories too deep for words. And for the first time in a long, long while, every bite felt like home. The fair opened with a brass band and glitter balloons. We didn't match that energy. We didn't need to. Our booth sat near the end of the row, past the hot dogs and kettle corn. A white tablecloth. Homemade signs. A folding table from the church basement. But by noon there was a line. Not for spectacle. For scent. For the way our pies smelled like something people thought they had lost. One man took a bite, closed his eyes, and whispered, "My grandmother used to make this. I haven't tasted this in 40 years." A young couple lingered near the apple tart. She said, "This tastes like real. Like someone cared." We didn't rush. Didn't push. Just served. Each slice, wrapped with care. Each word, offered slowly. Around 2 o'clock a woman approached with a clipboard. City logo on her jacket. She asked for me by name. "Are you Ruth?" I wiped my hands on my apron. "Yes, ma'am." She smiled, eyes soft. "We're selecting a feature group for the city's next heritage campaign. Would your ladies be willing to represent the legacy section?" I blinked. Legacy. Not leftovers. Not burdens. Legacy. Dolores clutched my arm. Jean gasped. I nodded. "Only if we can bring our flower and our stories." She laughed. "That's exactly why we want you." Later that afternoon, a small girl tugged on my sleeve. "Are you the lady from the pie article?" I smiled. "I might be." She handed me a wrinkled napkin with a crayon drawing a woman with white hair holding a pie surrounded by hearts. "My grandma's gone. But I want to learn like you." I bent down. "Hält her Gaze." "Then you're already halfway there, sweetheart." She beamed. And just like that, in the middle of that fair, under the hum of music and cotton candy, I felt it. I had not only returned to the center, I had expanded it. Made room for memory, for healing, for hands that still remembered how to give. That evening we returned to the church kitchen. Not because we had to, but because it felt right. The pies were gone. The tins were empty. But our hands were still warm. Dolores brought out a radio. Turned the dial until static faded into Ella Fitzgerald. Someone dimmed the lights. We sat around the folding tables, the same ones they once said were outdated. Now they looked like altars. Jean pulled out a notebook. "I think it's time we wrote it down. All of it. Recipes, yes. But also the stories behind them. The first time we got it wrong. The day someone cried into dough. The way cinnamon became a form of love." Rachel offered to help type. She said it could be a little book for the community, for the grandkids, for the women who think they've run out of firsts. I watched her move between tables, collecting fragments like treasures. She treated our words like heirlooms. Like things that mattered. Linda sat beside me quiet for a while. Then she asked, "Why didn't you ever tell me it hurt?" I kept my eyes on the pie crumbs in front of me. Took a long breath. "Because you thought I was fine with the corner. And for a while, I did too." She reached over. Placed her hand gently over mine. "I'm sorry, Mom." There it was. No defenses. No rush. Just a sentence that had taken decades to rise. I squeezed her fingers. Then let go. Some things need to be released to be remembered right. Across the room, someone laughed, that deep belly laugh that only comes when you know you're safe. Dolores waved her spoon in the air. "Next time, I'm teaching sweet potato pie. No arguments." We all cheered. And in that moment, I looked around at the mismatched aprons, the flour-streaked cheeks, the chairs pulled close. And I realized something simple. Something quiet. I never wanted the spotlight. I just wanted a seat where I wasn't invisible. And now not only did I have that, I had given it to others. We had built a circle out of crumbs. Out of memory. Out of dough and dignity. And it held. Oh, it held. The following Sunday, they invited me to speak. Not at the pulpit. Not with a microphone. Just a small circle after service in the fellowship room with folding chairs and lukewarm coffee. The theme was quiet restoration. Fitting. I wore my softest cardigan. The one with a hole in the cuff and a story in every thread. Rachel stood behind me, hand on my shoulder. Jean brought the pie. Dolores set out the napkins. I didn't prepare a speech. Didn't need one. I looked at the room, faces, new and known eyes, waiting without pressure. Then I said I used to think legacy was loud. Big houses. Big tables. Big gestures. I paused. Let the words breathe. But lately I've learned it's quieter than that. Sometimes it's a crust that holds when the filling is heavy. Sometimes it's a name written in someone else's handwriting. And sometimes, it's just not being forgotten. No applause. Just silence. The respectful kind. The kind that says, "We hear you." Afterward, a young mother came up to me. She held her daughter's hand. My mom passed last year. She never got to teach me her recipes. I nodded. Touched her wrist gently. "Come next Tuesday. We'll start with biscuits." She smiled like someone had just opened a door she'd been knocking on for months. Later that day, Linda brought over an envelope. Inside was a photo. Old, grainy, but full of color. Me standing at my pine table, Tyrone and Rachel beside me, hands covered in flour. She said I found it cleaning out the attic. Thought you'd want to keep it. I traced the corner of the frame. Felt the dust, the truth. Then said, "I think we should hang it in the kitchen." She nodded. Not as permission, but agreement. That night I hung the photo above the stove. Right where the spice rack used to be. The cinnamon jar still sat by my window, cracked and honest. I lit a candle. Let the scent rise. And as the shadows danced across the wall, I whispered to the house. This is center. The following Sunday, they invited me to speak. Not at the pulpit. Not with a microphone. Just a small circle after service in the fellowship room with folding chairs and lukewarm coffee. The theme was quiet restoration. Fitting. I wore my softest cardigan. The one with a hole in the cuff and a story in every thread. Rachel stood behind me, hand on my shoulder. Jean brought the pie. Dolores set out the napkins. Linda helped fold the chairs with a kind of reverence I hadn't seen in her hands before. I didn't prepare a speech. Didn't need one. I looked at the room, faces new and known, eyes waiting without pressure. Then I said I used to think legacy was loud. Big houses, big tables, big gestures. I paused. Let the words breathe. But lately I've learned it's quieter than that. Sometimes it's a crust that holds when the filling is heavy. Sometimes it's a name written in someone else's handwriting. And sometimes, it's just not being forgotten. I let that sit. The room didn't clap. But there was a quiet hum, the kind that comes when everyone is holding the same memory without having to explain it aloud. Afterward, a young mother came up to me. She held her daughter's hand. My mom passed last year. She never got to teach me her recipes. I nodded. Touched her wrist gently. Come next Tuesday. We'll start with biscuits. She smiled, like someone had just opened a door she'd been knocking on for months. Another woman approached quietly. Older but unfamiliar. She wore a faded brooch and carried a manila envelope. I lost my sister last fall, she said. We used to bake together every Thanksgiving. I thought, maybe, you could show me how to remember her through my hands. I took the envelope. Inside was an old creased recipe for persimmon pudding. No measurements. Just lines like stir until it feels like her hug. Add cloves until it smells like October. I looked up. Felt something catch in my chest. We'll make it together, I whispered. Later that day, Linda brought over a box. Inside was a photo. Old, grainy, but full of color. Me standing at my pine table, Tyrone and Rachel beside me, hands covered in flour. She said I found it cleaning out the attic. Thought you'd want to keep it. I traced the corner of the frame. Felt the dust, the truth. Then said I think we should hang it in the kitchen. She nodded. Not as permission, but agreement. She helped me place it on the wall just above the stove. Right where the spice rack used to be. And for a moment, we both stood there looking not at the past, but at the space that had made us remember who we were. The cinnamon jar still sat by my window, cracked and honest. I lit a candle. Let the scent rise. And as the shadows danced across the wall, I whispered to the house. This is center. Winter came quietly that year. No snowstorms. No power outages. Just frost on the windows and the sound of kettles whistling at the right time. The Tuesday class never stopped. Even when the church heater broke, even when someone lost a cousin, even when arthritis flared. We wore gloves between turns at the counter. Brought extra shawls, shared thermoses of soup. I added a new card to the recipe box. Pie for cold days. Underneath, I wrote best served with silence and company. One morning I arrived early. The light hadn't reached the basement windows yet. Only that blue-gray color you get when the world is still deciding to wake. I stood at the table alone, palms on the wood, and breathed. The room didn't echo anymore. It held warmth, laughter, memory. The door opened softly. Rachel came in. She wasn't carrying her phone. Just a single pie tin wrapped in a towel. She smiled. I made this one myself. Your crust. She held it out with both hands. I took it. Felt the weight. The uneven edges. The love. You did good, I said. She exhaled relieved. Like she'd been waiting to hear that her whole life. Others arrived. Coats hung. Flour dusted. Stories resumed. That day we didn't bake for the fair. Didn't prepare anything to impress. We made extra peas just to deliver. To the women who couldn't make it. To the widows who hadn't found their way downstairs yet. To the caregivers who never had 2 hours for themselves. Legacy doesn't wait on holidays. It waits for hands. And warm rooms. And someone to remember your name. By noon the church van was full. Labeled boxes. Tin trays. Little handwritten notes tucked into each lid. Dolores said, we should call it a delivery of remembrance. We all agreed. We didn't ring the bells hard. We just placed the boxes gently. Sometimes we stayed for tea. Sometimes we just left the pie and a folded napkin. That evening, back in my kitchen, I sat at the pine table. The one no one used to sit at but me. Now it had marks from coffee cups. Crumbs from other hands. Even a small crack Rachel had tried to mend with wood, glue, and care. I didn't mind. It meant the table had lived. I poured tea. Lit the candle. Watched the cinnamon jar catch the glow and cast it back in gold. And I thought. They had moved me to a corner without cruelty, but also without care. And I had returned not in anger but in scent. In presence. In pie. I had not demanded space. I had created it. And in doing so, I made room for others to find center too. What quiet legacy do you hope to leave behind? We'd love to read your story in the comments below. You are not alone. Your journey matters. Subscribe to Grandma Radio, where every story is a second chance. Maybe you've been moved to a corner too. Not by words, but by silence. By smaller chairs, by quieter rooms. By stories told without your name in them. Ruth didn't ask for attention. She didn't shout. She simply stood in a kitchen and said, "This matters. I matter." Sometimes, reclaiming your place isn't about walking back into a room, it's about opening a new one. And setting the table for someone else who's been waiting for a sign they still belong. If you've ever felt unseen, uninvited, unheard, you're not alone. We've all had moments where the world kept spinning, and we sat still holding our breath in the back of the room. But stillness is not absence. And silence is not surrender. It's waiting. It's remembering. It's building something from memory and flour and gentle hands that never forgot how to give. So, if Ruth's story touched something in you, if you've ever felt pushed aside gently, let us know. Comment, "To love," if this story spoke to your heart. Or comment, 7 if you're still looking for your space to stand. And if nothing else, take one quiet breath and remember, you were never just background.